Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, you can already tell by the tone of my voice that I'm happy because my Celtics had a very nice bounce back last night after losing game one in kind of crushing fashion by self-imploding. They took care of business the entire game. Actually, that's not true. They did go down by 10 early, Sap. But then they rallied and really blew out the Heat. The final score not even indicative of what the real story was. 127-102. The Celtics win, tying the series at one game apiece and dealing the Heat their first loss at home this postseason. So, Sap, what was the biggest difference between games one and game two for the Boston Celtics?
Well, first of all, I like when they win because then you're able to give out the score correctly, 127-102, because when they lose, you give out the score as 107-118, and it confuses the hell out of me because you give the Celtics score first, the opposing team score second, no matter what happens. And I'm old school. I don't really like that. To me, it would be Miami won game one, 118-107, but you say the Celtics lost game one, 107-118. So that's just semantics, a little bit of nitpicking there.
It's called trying to create a narrative with, being a little bit creative. I'm not lying, but I'm trying to make it look a little bit better for the Celtics.
I know nothing about creating narratives. I do that on every podcast with LeBron James. And there I am. I just mentioned LeBron James, 82 seconds into the podcast. But the big difference last night is 3-point shooting. When you go 9 of 11 on threes in the first quarter, that's 82%. You're going to win the game. If you go 12 of 19, as they did in the first half, you're going to have a 25-point lead at halftime, which they had. And then they played even in the second half, which is all they had to do to secure that 25-point win. Jed, I just ran some numbers, which I like to do.
Yes.
In the Celtics' last 5 wins, the 4 wins against Milwaukee in the second round and last night's win in game 2 of this conference finals, the Celtics are 93 of 218 from 3. That's 43%. The way they play defense, if they shoot like that or close to that, you're going to be hanging banner 18 next fall at TD Garden. I will guarantee you that. If that continues, they're going to win the championship. That's how important that part of the game is, because we always talk about 3-and-D, right? 3-and-D players, guys that make it in the league as 3-and-D players. Well, the Celtics right now are the best defensive team in the league. And so far in the playoffs, they're right there as the best 3-point shooting team in the playoffs. If you put those two together, they are going to be nearly impossible to beat.
Yeah, the 3-point shooting was massive for the Celtics last night, obviously, and they ended up shooting, 50% on the night, 20 of 40, which is even me. I can do that math, Sap, that's 50%. But I think the biggest key for them was getting Marcus Smart back, and I know a lot of people have been talking about that today too. But it can't go unsaid how important he is to this team. And you've pointed it out multiple times, Sap, throughout the Celtics turnaround in the regular season and then the postseason, how much his game has changed and evolved to being that point guard that the Celtics really need and needed. And last night he was that, especially in the first half, Sap. He didn't shoot the ball particularly well, and he didn't shoot the ball great last night on a whole. He shot much better in the second half, but he was just being such a great facilitator, playmaker, and also he was playing, as you can just chalk up every night, really great defense. He finished the night, Sap, with 12 assists and 1 turnover. I mean, that you can't ask for a better performance from a point guard than a 12-to-1 assist to turnover ratio.
That's Aaron Rodgers' touchdown interception ratio the last 2 years in the NFL.
So here comes the narrative again.
Other guy, the narrative, again, I could put Aaron Rodgers into our basketball podcast because he owns 1% of the defending champion Bucks. So, I get away with it there. But just a great performance by Marcus Smart, who was 8 of 22 from the floor. You generally don't say a guy who shoots 8 for 22 from the floor had a great night, but he pretty much had a great night last night. Again, not a high shooting percentage, 36%, but he had 9 rebounds, he had 12 assists, 1 turnover, as you detailed. He completely controlled that game. And then in the third quarter, when Miami was kind of creeping back into it, and you remember Ime Udoka called the timeout and was livid at his team, which I think is a great sign. Even if you're up 16, 17 points, it's okay for the coach to light into his team as if to say, let's get our heads out of our asses. Let's not let this team come back on us again. Marcus Smart was their best player in the third quarter. Ended up having 11 points in the quarter, had that gorgeous, crossover dribble where Strus ended up just falling backwards and he drilled a 15-footer. And that kind of quelled some of that momentum that Miami had.
Sap on that play, the defensive play, he had either a strip or a block on it. So it was, he saved the Celtics from a little Heat run. The Heat were trying to make a run there and were successfully doing it. Jimmy Butler was really getting going, and Marcus Smart completely calmed the team down, which was, you look at third quarter of game one, that's what was lacking in game one. Somebody to say, okay, we got this, we're okay. And then, be able to calm the team down by either making a shot, making a defensive play. And so that was a huge difference in terms of why the Celtics were able to not let the Heat back in this game, is Marcus Smart in the third quarter. It sounds weird to say this, Sap, because, sometimes he plays at such a frenetic pace, and throughout his career, he's been kind of a guy who's just is an energy guy. But at this point in his career, especially after he came back from that injury, we've talked about this extensively in around January, he's become a calming presence for the team. He really is, Sap. Him being on the court, Jason Tatum's the best player. Again, we know that. It's not close in my mind. But Marcus Smart's the team leader. If there was a captain of the team, it would be Marcus Smart. So sometimes that doesn't work well, where you're not your best player, thinks they're the team leader, but they seem to listen to the guy. And so that him being that role, and also being able to adjust his game where he's not playing at such a frenetic pace and he's not taking terrible shots all the time, that the leadership thing comes across better. And he's really, I think, able to calm the team down with his play, something that I never thought I was going to say.
We've been doing this together for nearly a decade before Marcus Smart came to the Boston Celtics in 2014. And you're a huge Marcus Smart fan, and I always push back. But something happened, as you said, the middle of this season, when he came back from missing 5 or 6 games and the team was just wallowing in mediocrity. It's almost as if he looked in the mirror and says, okay, it's time for me to be a point guard. I'm going to facilitate, play defense. I'm going to channel Dennis Johnson, who's in the Hall of Fame. I'm going to channel Maurice Cheeks, who's in the Hall of Fame, and be that type of point guard, a guy that can still contribute, scoring 12, 13 points a night. But I'm going to play great defense. I'm going to be the guy who sets up our offense. I'm going to be the guy that is high energy, high IQ, do all of that stuff. And that's what he's done. Look at the numbers this year, Jet. He's played 82 games this year, including the playoffs. In the games he's played, the Celtics are 55-27. That's a 67% winning percentage. He's missed 13 games in the regular season, and in the postseason, they're 5-8. That's 38%. They're a much better team with Marcus Smart than without Marcus Smart. And I've evolved in my opinions about Marcus Smart, because I always thought he was somewhat overrated, beloved by the fans, that fake intensity guy. I'm more of a J.D. Drew over Trot Nixon guy. I like the smooth kind of guys who go out there and put up better numbers. You love Trot Nixon. I like
favorite
J.D.
Red Sox
Drew, right?
all time, Trot Nixon.
Absolutely. I mean, my favorite baseball player is Barry Bonds, the ultimate in talent and productivity. But you get my point. You're more of the dirt dog guy. I'm more of the high level talent.
Yeah, Bonds was both, in fairness.
He was both. He was a dirt dog, and he was just a prick out there, and no one seemed to like him. And in fact, I know we're going to be doing a podcast in a month or so with Dale Scott, former Major League Baseball umpire, who got to meet last week. And first thing I asked him was, how was Barry Bonds as a person? And he told me some things. We'll detail it on the podcast when Dale Scott joins us, probably in about 5 or 6 weeks, or whenever the NBA Finals is over. But no, Marcus Smart was brilliant last night, because what he does is he takes pressure off of Jason Tatum. In game one, you're asking Jason Tatum to be your primary ball handler, your primary scorer, also play defense on Jimmy Butler, at least on some possessions, and also be an elite rebounder, right? Because, the Celtics at times kind of fall asleep rebounding. They even did in game two somewhat. You can't put that on players on a consistent basis at this level with the stakes that these guys are playing for. I don't know how many times I've said this. The great Michael Jordan, who most people think is the greatest player ever, I think is the second greatest player ever. The Chicago Bulls did not ask Michael Jordan to be their primary facilitator, rebounder, and defender. Now, he did all of those really well, in addition to scoring 30, 35 every night. But they had Scottie Pippen, who was as good a defender, if not a better defender, as good a rebounder, if not a better rebounder, as good a passer, if not a better passer. So you kind of share those responsibilities. Kobe Bryant always had someone who would do things to take some pressure off him. Hell, he had Shaq, who was
and when he didn't, they were
years. They weren't good. I mean, his final 3 years, when of course Kobe was banged up, they averaged 22 wins per season. But after Shaq left,
the year he scored 81. Yeah, the year he scored 81.
Yeah,
they weren't good. And he was at
good.
the height of his powers, obviously.
We're kind of seeing that a little bit with LeBron now, who's 37 years old. And LeBron's always been a guy who's been asked to do everything. And he physically and mentally could do it. We saw Giannis in Series 2 against the Celtics kind of come up short because it's exhausting. If you're asking Jason Tatum to run the offense, score, rebound, defend, do it all, at some point he's going to wear down. So with Marcus Smart taking care of the facilitation and a lot of the defense, now Brown and Tatum can do their thing, still play good defense, but concentrate on what they're really needed for, which is scoring. And it kind of trickles through the entire team. So you put Marcus Smart back on the court in game 2, big improvement there. And also Al Horford deepens that lineup. I mean, they finally were able to put their starting 5 out there of Horford, Rob Williams, Brown, Tatum, and Marcus Smart. That's the best starting 5 in the NBA. It's the best defensive team in the NBA. And you really have guys out there that can also shoot threes. Marcus Smart's not a great three-point shooter, but he'll hit them. So you got 5 guys that, have different ways to beat you. And we saw that with a 70-45 lead at the half, that the second half was not even worth watching.
It put the guy, their 2 main bench guys, Grant Williams and Peyton Pritchard, in roles that they're much more comfortable with, especially Grant Williams. Difference between game 1 and game 2. Grant Williams was great last night. 19 points off the bench, shot 5 of 7 from the floor, hit both of his 3-point attempts, and was 7 of 8 from the free throw line. Sap. When you play the role that you're best at, that's what you want. Ideally, you don't want to ask players to do more than they're capable of. And listen, Grant Williams could have a good game or 2 as a starter, but consistently he's best suited for the role that they have penciled out for him, which is the guy coming off the bench. And Sap, I'm glad that you sort of mentioned, you can't ask Tatum to be everything, because that sort of leads into what went wrong for Miami last night, which is that's what they ask kind of consistently of Jimmy Butler. And that the Heat obviously could still win this series. They could still win the championship. I don't think anybody would be shocked if either of those things happens. But their fatal flaw, because we've said this before, Sap, all these teams, you throw a blanket over them, they all have some sort of flaw. The Heat's fatal flaw is they don't have a consistent secondary scoring option to Jimmy Butler. And you saw that last night. Butler was really good, 29 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, steal. He played very, very well, 11 of 18, so he was efficient too. But the next high scorer on the team was Vincent, Gabe Vincent with 14, and then Oladipo had 14 off the bench, but that was mostly in garbage time. You need more than 6 points from Bam Adebayo, who only took 6 shots for them last night. Tyler Hero, 11 points, 5 of 11 from the floor. You need more from him. If the Celtics are able to create this box score for the Heat for the rest of the series, the Celtics will win in 5 games. The Heat can't win with just Jimmy Butler putting up a big game. They can't do it.
No, they really can't, especially when Bam Adebayo has been pretty much invisible the first 2 games, right? And remember in the bubble 2 years ago, he destroyed the Celtics on both ends of the court. Absolutely. But now here's the difference. You got Al Horford was there in game 2 and will be playing the rest of the series unless he, goes into safety protocol for the 4th time this year, which I think would be a record. And then you've got Rob Williams, who in the bubble 2 years ago didn't really play much, right? So now you've got him playing, so they can kind of negate what Bam Adebayo gives you. And
they throw bodies at him. And Grant, they put 3 different dudes on him.
Is a big, strong guy, so he can kind of muscle him around. You could see the difference in athleticism and size of these 2 teams. Like we saw how big Milwaukee was, because Milwaukee's a big physical team too. Well, now we're seeing the Celtics are bigger and more athletic than Miami. Tyler Hero hasn't been the player in the first 2 games that he was in the bubble. He had a great year this year, and he's always capable of exploding for 25, 30 points. They miss Kyle Lowry. I mean, the guy is a champion, and give credit to Vincent and Strus. They've both done okay, but they would be better served coming off the bench. Oladipo's still trying to find himself. Duncan Robinson is gone missing in action pretty much for the postseason. They threw him in last night in garbage time, and maybe he's going to have to play more now because you may not have PJ Tucker, who has a knee. So Miami is somewhat depleted here without Kyle Lowry, and if PJ Tucker's out, even more pressure on Jimmy Butler. And again, you can't ask a guy to carry a team, not just in scoring, but in everything else. And that's what Miami's going to ask Jimmy Butler to do. I mean, he's their best passer.
Right, especially at this point, Sep. In the Eastern Conference Finals. Like you can't – we've seen it like we said, we've talked about this, but LeBron in like '06, he did that but that's, again, he's an all-time top, wherever you want to debate him, anywhere in the top, 3, 4,
The
5.
best. No, the best.
Okay, for you. But, listen, there's a case to be made. I
Numero
don't agree
uno.
with it.
Numero
I don't agree with it, but
number
there's a
one.
case to be made. And with Luka Doncic, who looks like he's going to, by the time his career is over, will be
Sure.
in consideration for, top 15, top 10 player. He has that type of skill. But
they're not asking him to be the best defender as well, right?
That's true. That's fair. That's a good point. They're not asking him because he's not capable of that right now. Jimmy Butler obviously is capable of that. He is the Heat's best passer, rebounder, scorer, defender. He is that.
He is.
But they're in the Eastern Conference Finals. They're playing a really, really good team. If he has to do that, be all those things every single night, they can't win this deep in the postseason. No. They just can't do it. They need Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero to step up. They need some other guys to step up, ideally too. But Adebayo, Sap, 6 shots is just that's absurd. He should not. He's the second best player on the team. He should not be taking just 6 shots.
No. And you can run your offense through him. This is a guy that averages 5 assists a game. I mean, he's essentially a 20-10-5 guy. There's not a lot of those guys in the league
either.
No,
he's not just a stick him in the post center. He can shoot threes.
He can go from the nail. He can go from the elbow. I mean, he's not going to go out and take a ton of threes. He can hit them if necessary, but he's a guy who's a very versatile player, and he's been invisible these first 2 games. So Jimmy Butler's going to need him to help scoring and rebounding. Again,
is it a confidence issue, Sep, do you think? Or is it that they're just not running their offense correctly? I mean, we know how great of a coach Eric Spoelstra is. So he knows. If we know this, he knows this. So I don't know what the situation is with Adebayo. Is it a frustration thing that they're running so much through Butler, or is it him, or is he not feeling confident because the Celtics are doing something defensively against him that's making him not feel comfortable?
Well, I think now he's facing size and quality size in Rob Williams. And like you said, Grant Williams can get under your skin. He's a physical guy. And then last night you got Horford back after he didn't play in game 1. And, I think that's something that Miami's going to have to address. And I also think that without Kyle Lowry, now you're asking Jimmy Butler to run your offense as well. It will run smoother if Kyle Lowry's out there, and then everybody can kind of fit into their places where they're most comfortable. I don't know if Kyle Lowry's coming back. I mean, we're talking about a 36-year-old guy with a hamstring. I mean, that's never easy to come back from. And then if you throw into the fact that PJ Tucker could be out, now you're down 2 of your top 6 players. Arguably your second best player in Kyle Lowry or your third best player in Kyle Lowry. I mean, Miami's in a tough spot right now. All the momentum was with the Celtics, and we saw last night, they are the better team. Again, if they continue to play the defense they have since pretty much the beginning of the season. I mean, they've been an elite defensive team all year. They started to get better offensively midseason, and that's why they were able to put this streak together. And then if they're hitting threes at 43%, which they have in their last 5 wins, no one's beating them. And I question if the games are even going to be that close, because they just can stretch it out from there because they continue to play great defense and then beat you to death by hitting all those threes.
Yeah, and Sap, this is sort of my last word on the Celtics before we go to the other series that we touched on briefly. The one concern I have about that, and I agree with you, if they hit their threes, they have a very, very good chance of winning the title. They need to find a way to be less reliant on it in games where it's going down, and that worries me a little bit in that. If the games where they have not shot well from 3, they've lost. They're capable of winning games where they don't shoot well from 3 because they have guys like Tatum and Brown who could score from anywhere on the court. They need to be able to figure out how to, when games aren't going exactly how they want to their model, where we're knocking down threes all the time, how to get to the basket more. You've said this before, maybe take more mid-range stuff. I'd like to see them be able to win a game where the threes aren't going down at a 45% plus clip.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, you want to have that also in your bag, right? You want to be able to say, well, we're not hitting threes tonight. Maybe we've got to scale it back a little bit, but let's try to get the ball down low, or let's drive the ball to the basket. What I think they've done a really good job of is getting these open threes because of ball movement. And it's not just ball movement on the perimeter. You could sit there and have 5 guys outside the 3-point line and just pass the ball around. That isn't going to do anything because that's easy to defend. But when you have players like Tatum and Brown and Smart who can dribble, drive, penetrate, and then kick out to the corner to Grant Williams or kick out to Peyton Pritchard or whoever. Now you're getting open threes. And then maybe even Grant Williams gives up that corner three, kicks it out to the wing to Jaylen Brown, who drives again and then kicks it to the top of the key to Marcus Smart. You get my point. Great ability on offense. That's where they're really difficult to stop. And if they're able to do that, they're going to get a lot of open threes and they should be able to make them. But you're right. If it's not going well on a given night, you've got to find a different way to win. And I think they can. The only thing with threes is sometimes it's almost like a mathematical equation. It's like, just keep taking them. I remember after game one against Milwaukee, when everybody was all bent out of shape that they took 53s, they hit 18 of them. 36% is okay. You can kind of live with that. My take on that is continue to take them if they're giving them to you. I mean, if Grant Williams is not going to be covered in game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinals, let him take 18 of them. He hit 7 of them, which is nearly 40%. You won the game in a blowout.
To Ime Udoka's credit, that's the strategy they use. He said, they talked about this after the game. He told Grant, he's like, don't worry about it. If you miss a couple, if they're giving you a shot, take it. And so the Celtics, the coaching staff and the players trust the guys they have that they play in their rotation now to knock down open shots. The only guy I think they don't believe can do that consistently is probably White, but they still they want him to take it, but I think that they're willing to hook him and put in Pritchard for him if he's not knocking them down. With Grant, I think they're just like, eventually he'll knock them down. Same with Pritchard. White's just not a very good shooter. And so if he's, he's not even quite streaky, but if he knocks a couple down, that's you take that. But if he misses his first 3 open ones, I think they're fine to say, okay, maybe you stop taking them. But with like Pritchard, obviously Tatum and Brown and Smart and Grant, I think they say if you have them, take them. If they're going to give it to you, we're going to take the shot. So I do think it's a lot of trust in the players that they have to take and knock down open threes, which, listen, this has been a problem for the Celtics the past couple of years, not enough 3-point shooting. They have plenty of 3-point shooting now. And so it's a matter of, can they make it consistently? And in the games where they aren't, can they find ways to score outside of shooting threes? That could be the difference between them winning the championship or not.
Right now, they're shooting a higher percentage in the postseason than Golden State is shooting from 3. So when they meet in the finals in a couple of weeks, if they're able to shoot as well as Golden State does, I think they can beat them because they're a better defensive team and they're bigger. Maybe we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves because the Celtics are still 1-1 and Golden State's up 1-0. And I would never want to bet against Luka Doncic. But the idea is they're shooting at a very high level. I think it's going to continue. People are just worried that it won't continue. And look, there's going to be games where it's not there. If you can shoot 40% in 4 of 7 games, you're going to win those games, and then you're going to win the series. That's kind of what happened in the Milwaukee series, and we'll see what happens against Miami. It certainly was there last time when they shot 50% in that easy win over Miami.
Yeah. All right, Sap. And the other series, game 2 is tonight in Golden State. Game 1 was not particularly close. The Warriors won 112-87. Luka Doncic was pretty successfully bottled up by the Warriors, held to just 20 points on 6 of 18 shooting. And he also had 7 turnovers in that game, Sap. And the Warriors, just a really well-rounded game for them. All 5 starters in double figures, 2 guys off the bench in double figures. They really just cruised to a nice and easy win. Sap, what adjustments do the Mavericks have to make, and can they make them?
I just wish at some point Dallas didn't have to have everything run through Luka. Now, Luka's their point guard, right? He's their
That's
by far
the roster
their best
they
passer.
have.
That's what they have. They basically have surrounded him with some good and streaky 3-point shooters, right? So you're at the peril of, is Brunson going to hit some threes? Who else is going to contribute there? Are they going to be able to do that to take some pressures off of Luka? Because I think Luka has just so many ways to score. I mean, he's got an incredible skill set. I just wish they had the ability at times to maybe post him up or try to have him as a cutter rather than having him initiate all the offense, because that, again, is draining on him. The thing with Luka, he's not a terribly efficient shooter. I think eventually he'll get better. He's only 74% from the free throw line, which is maddening. A guy that skilled should shoot better than that. And he can be around 34% from 3. He can get really hot like he did in game 7 against Phoenix and just carry you. So, again, how good is he going to shoot in a given game? That's what you have to see what happens. But I would like to see that at some point. The problem is Golden State has so many guys that contribute on offense and defense. Just look at the different type of defenders they can put on Luka. You can have Andrew Wiggins, who's a good defender, 6'7", 6'8", wildly athletic. Jonathan Kuminga can come in and give you 4 minutes in each half to check Luka. Obviously, Draymond can bang him around a little bit. I think Klay Thompson isn't quite up to the task right now because he's coming off those injuries. But Golden State has a lot of different guys they can throw at Luka. They play excellent defense. And, of course, we know what they can do on offense. I don't even think Golden State's playing that great right now. But they won that first series against a depleted Denver team. And then they faced Memphis, and Ja was out of games 4, 5, and 6. And also, Golden State just knew how to finish those close games better than Memphis. Now we're seeing them against Dallas. I think Dallas is better equipped than Memphis to win those close games. But are they going to get to close games? Because Golden State, as we see, and you've said it perfectly, they're a front-running team. They get out to that early lead. They just build on it, and it's, Steph Curry, even if he's not shooting well, doing a lot of dancing on the court.
And this is something that I talked about before the series, and why I picked Golden State is because their defensive advantages are guarding wing players and defending the 3-point line. They don't really defend the paint because they're not a big team. And so they're able to take away the things that Dallas does best. And I believe in the talent of Luka Doncic to be able to, play much better than he did in game 1 and be able to overcome, a lot of that. But as a team, I just don't think that they have enough of the assets that you need to counter what Golden State does defensively. I think it plays a lot right into their hands. That's why, hopefully, if the Celtics are able to play like they did last night and get to the finals, for me, I think that the hugest impact players for them potentially could be Al Horford and Rob Williams, because I don't see that the Warriors have a lot of guys who can counter what the Celtics would want to do in the paint in that series. You saw it a little bit in round 2 with Steven Adams in the 2 games that he played. And I know I mentioned this before. He was able to be really, really effective, and he's a good player, certainly not a great player, but the Warriors don't really have size. So the way you take advantage of them on defense, because they have a lot of really good wing defenders, is you got to pound the ball in the paint. You got to win the rebounding battle. And I don't know that Dallas is equipped to do that. I know that Luka can win a game or 2 by himself completely. He very well might in this series, but I don't know that the guys like Brunson and Dinwiddie are going to be able to be all that effective, because there's so many good defensive players on Golden State, specifically defending that type of player.
And then you're asking for Dwight Powell to be a big contributor. And if you're asking that to happen, you're probably not going to win the series, right? I mean, he's a nice role player, but I don't think he's going to be the difference in this series.
No, I don't think so either. So we'll see what happens. Again, game 2 is tonight, so we'll certainly react to that. But there wasn't all that much to go off of in game 1 to react to. So I don't see why we'd spend, a ton of time on it. And Sap, what we want to do now is do about 5 minutes each on the teams that were eliminated in the prior round, a little postmortem. And we can start with the team that the Celtics eliminated, the defending champions, the Milwaukee Bucks. What does this offseason look like for them? What are their biggest needs?
I wonder if Milwaukee is just going to look in the mirror this offseason and say, look, if we had Chris Middleton, we probably could have beaten the Celtics. And I don't know if that's the case. They did get to game 7 against the Celtics and then got blown out. Do you think that Middleton would have been the difference in Milwaukee winning or losing? We'll never know.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable thing to look and say, though. Say, hey, we're this guy away from possibly winning a title. I don't think that's crazy.
But it also seems to me, Jet, that every team in the league can have that question. Philadelphia can say, well, if Joel Embiid doesn't hurt his thumb and get his orbital socket broken, maybe Philadelphia's playing in the conference finals instead of Miami. Or, obviously last year the Lakers could say, well, if Anthony Davis was healthy, they probably would have beaten Phoenix and maybe made a run at the title. And Anthony Davis is never healthy. But Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday and Giannis are all pretty durable guys. I don't think they're guys that are going to be getting hurt a lot. I think Milwaukee maybe has to kind of construct their team a little bit differently. I think the idea of just packing the paint and letting teams shoot from 3 is maybe a thing of the past, since there's a lot of really good 3-point shooting teams. And we saw what the Celtics did against them in that series. I mean, they were just, elite shooting threes, especially in big games. Game 2, when it was, we both agree, a must win for the Celtics. They went out and shot nearly 50% from the floor on threes. And then in game 7, they shot 40%, hit some big ones and blew them out. So, do you just come back and say, well, we're just going to let teams shoot from 3 and see what happens? That's almost like going into a game in the NFL and saying, yeah, I know we're facing a really good quarterback. Let's play zone defense against him and just hope he has an off day. I don't think that that's really a strategy. So maybe they're going to have to change their strategy a little bit and then add 3-point shooters to help Giannis. And then maybe at some point, don't put so much pressure on him again, because I think he was spent by the end of the Celtics series, because he's one player in the league like LeBron who's asked to do everything, be the leading scorer, rebounder, facilitator, defender, spokesman, captain, tape ankles, do everything. Take a little pressure off the guys who he has more in the tank at the end of the season.
Yeah, in terms of their free agency too, they have a couple of guys who are players that we saw pretty frequently in that series who either can become free agents or are free agents. Wes Matthews is going to be an unrestricted free agent. Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton both have player options. Sap. I think Connaughton is a guy they'd want to keep. Portis, I assume, will pick up his player option because he loves Milwaukee. He's underpaid. He's only making $4 million a year. He would make more than that on the open market, but this is the deal he chose last offseason because he wanted to stay with Milwaukee. So I think that there's probably a fair chance he picks that up. Connaughton picked up his player option. It would be for $5.3 million. That seems about right for what he would make on the open market, maybe a little bit more. So I could see him picking that up too. Wes Matthews did some nice things early in the series, Sap, but he kind of petered out late and showed his age. So I don't know that they bring him back. I think a big question for them is Grayson Allen has 2 years, $18 million left on his contract. After the season, it's 1 year, $18 million. That's a lot for a player that was pretty ineffective in this series. Do they potentially move on from him? So those are sort of the questions I have in terms of the guys that are on their roster right now. Grayson
Allen's going to make $18 million next year.
Nope. Sorry. I had that wrong. I was going to say, he's making half of that.
9.9 million.
9.4 about
nice
9.3 and a
half.
Nice
country. Nice country. I mean, because I know Duncan Robinson's making even more than that. Now he's just sitting on the end of the bench for Miami. Grayson Allen was a disaster against the Celtics because the only thing the guy really can do is shoot. He could score in some other ways, but he's supposed to be this elite shooter. He was horrible in that series, and he's a liability on defense. Yeah, so they're going to have to address their roster, but I also think they have to, while addressing the roster, try to pivot to the modern NBA where you do have to defend the 3. We talked about it earlier in the week, Jet. The 4 remaining teams left are the 4 best defensive teams against the 3. Yeah, that means something. And Milwaukee's not very good defending the 3 because they kind of let you have it and hope you miss. That's not a strategy. So I think they may have to maybe tweak that going forward.
Yeah, and I think that's the best word, Sap, with them before we move on to the next team is that tweaks are needed, not overhaul or anything like that. Because they still have the guy that we believe is the best player in the world right now, Giannis, and that's good enough to build any sort of team from. Holiday obviously still has high level basketball left in him. I believe that Middleton still is, he's only 30. He's got high level basketball left in him. So that's a solid core right there. Giannis is only 27, believe it or not. Lopez, I don't think you can expect him to be contributing at a high level for much longer, but still, a solid piece to have. But I think, if they add a couple more guys who can defend the 3, maybe add a little bit more, a guy who could shoot, they'll be fine. They'll be right in the mix next year, whether they make little tweaks or not, because they have Giannis. So I think that's, ultimately, if I'm a Milwaukee fan, I'm not overly worried because you have Giannis, but certainly little tweaks I think can be made and will make them a much more formidable team and just be healthy. But that's hard to say. So Sap, let's go to the next team in the Eastern Conference then that was eliminated in the last round. And I think this team has perhaps the most interesting offseason of anybody. And we'll get to Phoenix in a minute. And I think they might be the other contender for the most interesting offseason. But the 76ers lost in 6 games. They kind of went down with a whimper after tying it at 2 games apiece. What's their offseason look like, Sap?
They have a lot of questions, right? I think you're right. I think Brooklyn, who got eliminated in round 1, and Philadelphia got eliminated in round 2, they're going to be so interested to see what they do in the offseason because of James Harden. Does he opt in for one more year? Does Philadelphia give him a supermax contract, which I think would be a mistake. Are you going to give James Harden 5 years, 240 million, or somewhere in that neighborhood? I would say no. He looks like he's aging in dog years. There's going to be stipulations in the contrast that, James, when we get to camp next year, you'd better be in shape, because I think that's part of the problem. The great players who last and are able to contribute into the mid-30s and maybe even the later 30s, like LeBron, they take care of themselves. James Harden's never been that guy. Well, at the age of 33, he's going to have to do that. So they're going to commit to him. Obviously, they probably rue the day they let Jimmy Butler leave. Instead of keeping Butler, they went with Tobias Harris, which obviously is a mistake. And, you look back at Butler having problems in Chicago, Minnesota, and Philadelphia. Normally you would say, okay, it's got to be Jimmy Butler. That's the problem. Well, it just seems to me that Butler's such a competitive guy and a serious guy that he was on teams with a lot of elite players who were high draft picks who probably didn't give a crap about winning as much as Butler, and it turned them off. I mean, we hear the story about when Butler was in Minnesota, he took like the 4 guys at the end of the bench. He hooked up with them and beat the 5 other starters, 3 straight games. It's almost like, you guys are talented, Andrew Wiggins and Cat and all of you, and I'll just still beat you because I'm way more competitive. I think they have a problem with culture in Philadelphia. Now, they say they're bringing Doc Rivers back. Who knows in a month if the Lakers reach out to the 76ers and go, we'll send you whatever for Doc Rivers. If that's the case, if Philadelphia goes, okay, we'll take something for Westbrook. Doc Rivers and move on. Yeah, Westbrook for Doc Rivers. That would be an interesting trade. Yeah, but I just imagine Westbrook, Embiid, and Harden on the same team. That would be, that would be interesting. But they're not very deep, right? And you got to start to address, they're not deep at all. I mean, I thought their starting 5 was outstanding, but they're not very deep. But this all comes down to James Harden. And again, Embiid, who we love Embiid. I mean, he's a character, a personality, but it always seems like by the time you get to the playoffs, he's spent, he's injured. He kind of lost his way when that series against Miami was 2-2 because he didn't win the MVP. Like, if you're 2-2 in round 2 of the playoffs and you got a chance to win and you get off the rails because you didn't win the MVP, you got to be more mature than that, especially for an elite player like Joel Embiid. So they've got a lot of questions there. It's not necessarily constructing talent. It's about creating culture. And sometimes that's more difficult to do.
Sure. Harden. So just to give you the numbers, Sep, because I'm looking at them right now. If Harden picks up his player option, it's for $42.7 million for next year. The max he can sign, obviously, is, as you mentioned, I think like, 200 plus million over 5 years. That does seem at this point would be crazy to pay him, because that would be huge. How old is James Harden right now? 31.
He's going to be 33. He's going to be 33 by the fall.
Oh, he's going to be 33. So they're going to pay him 40 million, 42 million or more when he's 36, 37, 38. That's crazy.
Good luck. Yeah. Good luck with that.
That's not going to work. So they have to figure out. I don't know that he would be willing to take any sort of significant pay cut, maybe a small one, but I can't see him saying, cutting that 42 million in half for just the long-term security. I don't think he will do that. Here's a question, Sab, for James Harden. On the open market, just assume every team has cap room, even though they don't. Are there any teams in your mind that would pay him a max contract over 4 years?
If the contract wasn't an issue in terms of, cap space and all of
right.
that, yeah, the Lakers would jump in, wouldn't they? I mean, because that's what the
I'm
Lakers
asking
do.
You what you think. So again,
I wouldn't do it.
The cap space, I'm saying, will be an issue down the line, but right now, just pretend for this exercise, every team has cap space this summer, and that but to sign James Harden, you'd need to pay him 4 years. It would escalate. So by the 4th year, you're paying him about $55 million. So he would be the most expensive player in your team, arguably. Which teams would be willing to do that?
The Lakers, because they're always willing to do something like this, right? Because they have enough money, because look at the TV deal they have. They make $200 million a year from local TV. And in a couple of years, when the new contract kicks in, every team in the league is going to make $250 million. So in a couple of years, the Lakers are going to be pulling in $450 million just from national and local TV contracts, let alone selling tickets and everything else. They got plenty of money, and they're the Lakers. They jump into these types of things.
I'm asking Seth because we say this with free agents all the time. All you need is one team to up your value. So, teams are able to dump salary, whatever. It's hard. It's harder than it is in the NFL, obviously. But if a team really wants James Harden and to just absorb him into their salary cap, they can figure out a way to do it. I just don't know that there's many teams that would be like, yeah,
Right.
I feel comfortable paying this guy $40-50 million as you mentioned, Seth, aging in dog years. The team that popped into my mind.
Let me see if it's the same one. Let me see if we can do this in stereo.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Denver.
Mavericks. I said Dallas.
Okay, Mavericks. Okay, you said Dallas. I said Denver. You're the first letter right. But yeah, no, obviously Dallas makes sense. Mark Cuban, if they lose to, say, Golden State in 5 or 6 games, Mark Cuban is going to go to Luka and say, hey, we're close. We're going to get some pieces in here to put us over the top.
That's what it is, more so that I think he needs a sidekick. I do think they're redundant, Harden and Luka, because they're both essentially point guards who are fantastic scorers. And not good defensive players.
No, that would be a weak backcourt defensively. Lord, would that be a weak backcourt?
But I think that they're so desperate for a second guy to Luka. I don't know. I don't know what James Harden ends up. My guess is Philadelphia on a little bit of a cheaper deal. Again, he's a guy who has a big ego and has thought he should have won multiple MVPs. I don't know how willing he is to take a major pay cut, and I don't know how willing Philadelphia is to pay him an exorbitant amount of money after what they saw in this postseason. That's why I think they're such an interesting team this offseason.
Oh, absolutely. Is he going to take a discount? Probably not, because he's always gone for that big contract, because that's how he measures himself, is how much money he makes, which is great. That's what the idea of. But, is he going to take a discount to maybe win a championship? Does the championship mean all that to him? He's got a big sneaker deal. He's built his brand. Sometimes you look at it and say the sneaker deals maybe tied into winning. I've always said this, like Tom Brady would take discounts, and now Tom Brady, obviously the greatest quarterback ever, is able to sign a 10-year, $375 million contract with Fox Sports to do something he's never done before. But again, he's a 7-time Super Bowl winner, so the branding is there. I'm not putting James Harden in Tom Brady's category, but is winning all that important to James Harden? I threw Denver in there, but again, he and Jokic would be a weird combination. If Jokic is their primary ball handler, that would be kind of a weird fit. Harden at this point is a weird fit because he can't score like he used to. Still a good facilitator and a weak defender. It's like he's a tough guy to fit with some teams. Best bet is probably one more year in Philadelphia, get in shape, and now the market will expand for you if you prove you could play.
Yeah, I could see another team I could throw out there is Portland. Again, it kind of comes down to, what does James Harden want? Does he want to go get the most money possible, which would probably mean he's going to play on a bad team or a mediocre team? Or does he want to try to win a championship?
Right.
And his options are limited there too. He's not going to take a veteran's minimum salary. He could, if he opts in for the $42 million for Philadelphia, they still obviously have him and Embiid, but Philadelphia can't really then go and make significant improvements in the offseason because they're hard capped. They have Tobias Harris is making a ton of money, so they'd have to find a way to dump Tobias Harris if they want to bring in some free agents. I know there's been talk about Bradley Beal coming there. They'd have a very difficult time trying to get him in if Harden opts in. So they need to get deeper. I don't know that these good free agents, veteran free agents who help on, shorter contracts want to go to Philadelphia right now, because it seems like kind of a mess.
Aren't you going to Milwaukee if you have a choice, right? If I'm a 36-year-old guy, if I'm PJ Tucker or whoever, that type of player, and I want to go win another championship, and the contract isn't that big a deal, aren't I going to Milwaukee instead of Philadelphia? Who would you rather play with, Giannis or Embiid? I know I'd rather play with Giannis.
Yeah, well, I mean, Giannis has won a title, and Embiid has never even gotten to the conference finals. So if my goal is to win a championship, I'm going with the guy who's done it before. Another issue it's not a bad issue, but an issue nonetheless for Philadelphia is that Maxey and Tybalt's contracts are coming up soon, and they're going to have to pay them. Maxey obviously is going to get paid more, but right now he's making $2 million. He's in line for a big contract extension. So their cap sheet's not great. And they obviously have not been able to get over the hump. They have this generational player in Joel Embiid, but finding the right pieces around him have been difficult. And I don't see an easy path for them this offseason to be like, all right, we're going to fix this, that. They have a lot of issues to fix. A lot. It's not
before we go to the Western Conference teams that, lost in round 2, could you see Harden sign and trade with Portland for Dame Lillard? I mean, I'm just
No.
throwing that out there. No. Okay.
No, I'd say for the Blazers, it's like shuffling deck chairs in the Titanic. What's the difference for them? I think the Blazers are either gonna be, if they threw in Maxey, maybe I could see them doing that. But I don't. Then again, I don't know that makes Philadelphia all that much better.
He's staying in Philadelphia because Daryl Morey runs Philadelphia and loves James Harden, and James Harden loves Daryl Morey, and I just think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. It does seem likely. As weird as it is, Sap, that I guess a Westbrook for him trade could work, but the Lakers would have to include a lot more. Right. With Westbrook, and I can't imagine Philadelphia is particularly interested in Westbrook, though. Westbrook, I also think would have had an equal impact on them in the postseason that James Harden had. He had essentially one good game in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but interesting offseason for them.
For sure.
All right, let's go to the Western Conference, Sap. We'll start with the Grizzlies, who were the 2 seed, finished with the second best record in the NBA this year. 56 wins, 26 losses. They go down to the Warriors in a spirited 6-game effort. Ja Morant missed most of that series. What's their offseason, Sap?
I find this a bizarre team to try to figure out, right? Because they went 20-5 in the regular season without Ja. I'm going to throw this out to you. Would you trade Ja Morant if you're the Memphis Grizzlies? Okay.
No.
I get that he's a generational player, and he's a guy who, oh my God, he's as exciting to watch as anyone. He kind of comes to the court with the same vibe that Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant came to the court with. But I don't know how long he's going to last with the style of play. Again, that would be a very risky move if you're running Memphis and he goes on and has a 10-year career and wins 2 titles elsewhere else. And you traded him.
I trade him for Giannis.
Oh, right. Yeah, I would too. Yeah, absolutely. But here's the thing. What do you put around him? What do you have to put around him? You have to put shooters around him. You have to manage his minutes because he's going to be a guy that's going to miss time. We compared him to Derrick Rose and John Wall, that explosive athletic point guard that's going to get injured. So, you have to put some shooters around him and really get that good number 2 player. If they get that, then I think they can continue to contend. That's what they're going to have to face in the offseason.
Yeah, for them, it's never been a free agent destination. We know that, though. Now they have a very, very wealthy owner who said he's willing to spend. Ja Morant's already at that level where, okay, he's a superstar player. He could be the best player in a title contending or a title team. I think we both believe that. But the rest of the roster is a bunch of very good, not great players. I don't know that Jaren Jackson Jr. is ever going to be a perennial type all-star. Dylan Brooks, the same. Brandon Clark, the same. Desmond Bane, the same. All really good players, but not quite the level of being the second fiddle on a title contending team. So it's hard for them, and they're going to be way too good to be a lottery team. Obviously, they all had 56 wins this year, so they're not going to be able to do it likely in the draft. I mean, they could find a diamond in the rough. That happens in the NBA. Their probably best bet is to acquire a second star via trade. So of those guys I mentioned, Brooks, Clark, Bane, they have some other interesting young guys. Aldama is a young Italian guy, Sap, that they drafted last year that I think they're high on. Steven Adams has a big contract, so that works via trade. I think that's their most likely path to competing for a title is keep Ja Morant, keep some of these good, not great players, but try to package some of them for an upgrade of second guy to get kind of like what the Bucks did in getting a Drew Holiday. And they added a lot of draft picks, but they knew they weren't going to be valuable. That's what I'd do if I was Memphis. Because I think without that, they're just going to continue to be really good, but not be able to get over the hump, even as Ja Morant progresses in his game.
They're kind of like Dallas. They have this great player and then a bunch of role players, but they don't have that second guy.
Yeah, they have better role players than Dallas.
They do have better role players than Dallas, and I think that Luka's better than Ja Morant. He can just do more.
Yeah, I agree.
He's bigger. I think he's a better passer for sure. As out of shape as he looks sometimes, he's more durable because Ja's just so explosive that's always going to be a concern. The easy answer to every team who to add in the offseason is Bradley Beal, right? Because we think that Washington's going to move him. He wants to move out. He'd be the perfect 2 or 3 guy on a high-end team. That seems to be the easy one. I mean, Bradley Beal with Ja Morant would be a heck of a backcourt, and now you're on your way. So, yeah, they're going to have to add that second player who can take some pressure off of Ja Morant. Again, great comparison with Drew Holiday, a guy who comes in who you don't necessarily think of as that guy, more of a number 3 guy, but still a guy who could step up in big moments, is going to play defense, hit big threes, and has, a lot of that character that you like to bring to an organization, which Memphis kind of built their whole roster on this year. I mean, you look at that roster, that should not have been a 56-win team. No. And certainly they should not go 20-5 without its best player, but they were able to do that. And again, they played Golden State really tough, lost a couple of close games that a play here or there, they're the team playing in the Western Conference Finals, not Golden State. But just throwing it out there, someone would take a big set of balls to trade Ja Morant. That would be, that would be kind of crazy. But you know what? I'm here for crazy.
Yeah, I think, the danger for a team that had such a great regular season like Memphis is to say, we're pretty content and we think our players are going to develop and, we'll be able to do it that way. Again, I could be wrong. I just don't see Dylan Brooks or Jaren Jackson or Brandon Clark or Desmond Bane developing into an all-star, a consistent all-star caliber player. I think they're all going to have really long, really good NBA careers. And I think role player is maybe underplaying what they are because they're high-level players. But to win a title, you need a legitimate second, really, really good option. And I don't see that any of those are going to be that. So if I was Memphis, I'd be aggressive in trying to package some of those guys and getting that sort of player. We'll see what they do, Sap. Let's wrap up with the team that finished with the best record in the NBA by a large margin. The Phoenix Suns finished with a 64-18 record in regular season, their franchise best. And then they were the title favorites, and they end up going down in 7 games to the Dallas Mavericks, losing on their home court in blowout fashion. And they have a lot of questions now, starting with the restricted free agency of DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah, that's going to be a big thing. And DeAndre Ayton kind of imploded in Game 7. Monty Williams took him off the court. He didn't seem to react to it too well. And look, I mean, he's been a nice player since he's been in the league the last 4 years, but he went number 1. And we, of course, know that Luka went 3. So, 5-6 years from now, we're going to say, man, imagine if Phoenix took Luka instead of DeAndre Ayton, where they'd be. But, you're going to have to find out exactly what he is as a player. And then we've often talked about their ownership issues in Phoenix with Robert Sarver. Right. Is he going to step up and pay the money? They've kind of done this with Chris Paul leading the way the last 2 years and having the great regular seasons and getting to the finals last year. And then it just blew up in Game 7 against Dallas in a monumental, wasn't even a collapse. It was just a no-show, which I don't know what's worse. Is it worse to end the season in a second half collapse in Game 7 or to just not show up? I don't know. It just was a really, really bad look for Phoenix. But Ayton, you're going to have to commit to him if that's the case. He's a young player. He's very good. But there seems to be some sort of issue with him. I don't know if it's his lack of competitiveness or consistency or coachability, that there's something there. And those are tough things to deal with. And that's going to be a big question for Phoenix going forward.
I really like Ayton. I think he's a really good player that you can take advantage of matchup issues because there's not a lot of, kind of true back to the basket centers like him who are, truly talented and not just a black hole in there. And he's a really talented center. He sets good screens. He's an efficient scorer. He's not a great defensive player. He needs to work on that. I think he has the ability to be a good defensive player. He's not right now. And he's a very good rebounder. I don't think if Phoenix chooses to not pay him, I don't think Phoenix is anywhere close to being back where they are at this point, finishing with the best record in basketball. I think they'd take a step back. So I don't know what they do. I think there will be a lot of teams willing to pay Ayton. Like we said with James Harden, there only needs to be one, but I think there's going to be several teams that are willing to pay Ayton the max deal. Phoenix decided not to offer him that last year. Now he is restricted. So if somebody offers him a max deal, all it takes is Phoenix to sign, pen to paper. We're matching. And he's a member of the Phoenix Suns. I think that there's a high likelihood of a signing trade with him this offseason. There's only one team right now as it stands, I think, that can fit him in cleanly in a max contract to their cap sheet. I think it's Detroit. I might be wrong. It might be Oklahoma City. I think there's one or two teams that have the actual cap space to be able to do that. Both would be fine fits, Oklahoma City, Detroit. I think that would work. They're both building something there if he wants to go there. But Phoenix, if they don't re-sign him, really needs to try to work to sign and trade him and get something in return, especially with Chris Paul still playing at a high level, but he's 37. His deal expires in 2025, and he's getting paid $30 million a year up until that point, Sap. So they need to maximize these remaining years for Chris Paul, because as good as Devin Booker is, and I think we both think he's a very good player, I don't know that he can carry a team. I don't think he can, actually. So, yeah, and they also sap free agents. Besides Ayton, McGee is a free agent. I thought he was really good for them this year. Elfrid Payton didn't play all that much for them. Bismack Biyombo, you saw a lot of him in the postseason for some reason. He's a free agent. So they have other key free agents too. What do they need to do? What are they going to do?
They need to say 9 novenas, because I think their window is closed. I really do. I mean, it was last year in the finals, slam shut. Now they have a great regular season and then losing round 2 to Dallas. Game 7 was an embarrassment, a disaster, whatever you want. Chris Paul, who I love as a player, his legacy is now going to be detailed more than any current player in the league, quite frankly. I mean, LeBron's legacy is what it is. He's debated against Michael Jordan. I mean, Chris Paul's never won a championship, got to the finals last year. Is he the 5th greatest point guard ever? That seems to be the discussion. But he turned 37 on May 6th. And in the 5 games after turning 37, he averaged 9.4 points, 3.4 rebounds, 5.8 assists, and 3.6 turnovers per game. Those are disastrous numbers. I mean, here's a guy who, up until he turned 37, was having a really good postseason. I mean, he had a game where he had 28 points, 14 assists, and no turnovers. He had another game where he's 14 of 14 from the floor. Right. He was playing perfect basketball. He turned 37 and he just went downhill. I mean, it's just truly amazing. And again, he can be a guy who after a couple of years can start to wear on people. I don't have any high hopes for Phoenix next year. And look, are they the Green Bay Packers now where, okay, if they go out and win 64 games next year, do you really believe they're going to go into the postseason and just mow through and win a championship? I mean, they were fortunate to get to the finals last year. Again, I'll say this till I'm purple in the face. If Anthony Davis is not hurt in that first round series, the Lakers beat Phoenix last year. They also got fortunate that Denver had nobody besides Jokic in the second round, and then Kawhi misses the conference finals. And then you kind of start the finals with Giannis kind of feeling his way back after that knee injury. And then finally, when he was healthy, Milwaukee won the last 4 games. So they were fortunate to get there last year. And look, you need a little luck to win a championship. It was there for them last year. They blew it. This year, they were the best team in the regular season, and they didn't show up in game 7. So the legacy of Chris Paul's up for debate. And I think the future of Phoenix, even though we love Devin Booker and, if they do sign and trade DeAndre Ayton, they should get something in return. I think the window's closed.
That's a harsh reality for the Suns. It may be the truth. They have, I don't know, because you can't really put your finger on, okay, here's how they get better. They get better by Chris Paul getting younger, really. That's
right. He's like Benjamin Button from last time I checked. He's not Tom Brady. He's great, an all-time great. Love the
they
player.
made their bed with this, and I think they made a good decision to, go out, get Chris Paul, sign him to a big deal. I don't think that was a bad decision, but it did make their window short, and they didn't capitalize on it. And, that happens sometimes. And so, it ultimately, they weren't able to take advantage last year or this year of a pretty wide open field. And that may, haunt Chris Paul into his latter days. I don't know. But I don't think that there's any clear cut solution other than, you find a time machine for Chris Paul for the Suns to compete. Sap, last thing real quick, because we've gone over an hour now. Pat Bev's comments as he's been on a media car wash tour. ripping Chris Paul. We know they don't like each other. They have personal issues with each other. Pat Bev called him a cone, said he can't defend anybody. He's trash. Everybody knows he's trash. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Pat Beverly was so entertaining this week on ESPN, but he's got kind of a Donald Trump quality to him where I think he just likes to fight with people for the sake of fighting with people. And look, we know he doesn't like Chris Paul. A lot of players in the league don't like Chris Paul. But if you're going to give analysis, go ahead and do that. And that was very entertaining. But be more critical and analyze it more than just kind of name calling. And then don't come out in the next segment and talk about how great James Harden is because he's your boy. He's your friend. You love him.
He did the same thing with Kyrie Irving, too.
Exactly. So he's picking his
driving me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and he loves Jimmy Butler, and he was talking about that Jason Tatum doesn't defend on the other end, and JJ Redick, who does not suffer fools, was like, yeah, Jason Tatum plays defense on the other end. Did you watch him against Brooklyn where he, did a great job defending Kevin Durant? So I like Pat Bev. I think he's got a great future, but you got to be a little bit more buttoned up, and you can't be that one-sided and just destroy Chris Paul and praise James Harden. Chris Paul, as bad as he was in the postseason, was miles better than James Harden was in the postseason. It's just that we're not talking about Harden's legacy as much as we are talking about Chris Paul's legacy, and that's the difference there. So, be willing to criticize James Harden. The reason I love Kendrick Perkins so much, he's not afraid to criticize guys that are his friends
Everybody.
who he played with, whether it's Kevin Durant or even LeBron James. He'll criticize those guys, and that's good. That's why he's doing a really good job at what he does. JJ Redick, the same thing. You can't just bash Chris Paul and then praise James Harden. You got to criticize both if that's the case. So you got to be a little bit better than that if you're Pat Beverly. And then you got Matt Barnes involved, who, I think he went a bit too far in his criticism of Pat Beverly. Obviously, these guys that are doing this now, whether it's Kendrick Perkins or JJ Redick, they're criticizing players that are better than them historically, like way better historically. Like Kendrick Perkins should not be criticizing Kevin Durant or LeBron James. He's not in their league, but his job is to analyze and criticize if necessary. And that's what he's doing. We get that, Brian Scalabrini's criticizing players. He's nowhere near as good as Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum or somebody on the Miami Heat. But his job is to analyze and criticize. That's the job of the analyst. And that's why I think Beverly does have a future here. But at some point, he's got to stop trolling and be more analytical. I think that's where he can kind of butt it up a little bit.
Yeah, otherwise he's just going to host a podcast where he rips on players. I mean, that's
right.
That's the only
we do
thing.
Yeah, we do that.
So, yeah, I mean, I think he's entertaining. He obviously lost me when he started praising Kyrie Irving. That's the kiss of death for me. I was enjoying everything up until that point. Listen, I think Chris Paul has his limitations certainly right now. I don't think he's a cone. I think he's still a pretty good defensive player for his position. I think Pat Bev was entertaining in it, but obviously if you're looking for actual basketball analysis, and from Patrick Beverly, he's not going to give it to you. Which is fine. He's a personality, and not everybody has to be a basketball analyst. But he comes off with this, like you said, this Trumpian sort of air of I know everything. I am the best. I know all this stuff that you guys aren't privy to this information, which I just don't think is true. So you have to take it with a massive grain of salt. Obviously,
here's a suggestion for Phoenix. This would be wildly entertaining. Trade for Pat Beverly. Put him alongside.
Yeah, that would be great chemistry on the Suns.
Yeah, and just in Russell Westbrook go to Brooklyn to play with Kevin Durant. Let's go totally insane in the NBA next year.
Yeah. All right, Sap. Well, it was a long one, but it was fun. I enjoyed all the topics, and we're gonna keep up with every game reaction in the postseason. Talk about all these series and what's going on as the finals hopefully start to take shape, and the Celtics hopefully continue to play well. That will make me very, very happy, Sap. So this is the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage, and you can find the podcast wherever podcasts are found and get updates on the show via our social medias at JohnSap25, at JetStryer. And we will be back later with a new podcast, so stay on the lookout for that. And we'll talk to you later, everybody. See ya.